Hello, welcome to Quackalope, and today we're covering Vast, the Mysterious Manor by Leader Games. This will be a how-to-play video?
Yeah.
I mean, a how-to-play video on a game that has so much content I can't fit it into the camera up top.
Of epic proportions.
Yeah. So, just right off the bat, this first video you're watching is going to be an overview of Vast, the Mysterious Manor, the general setup, and kind of how these different asymmetric factions work. Then, you and I will each be tackling, I think, 3 characters each.
Yeah, we will.
Doing a quick, breakdown on how each one of these characters play, because this is a chaotic, asymmetric tile placement, discovery, worker management, card hand drafting.
So in other words, vast.
It's everything.
Vast.
It's vast.
Yeah.
So, if you're here to get a overview of Vast, you come to the right point.
To the best
thing. If you're here to find out about a specific character, the Warlock, Paladin, Manor, Skeleton, Spider, Armor Knight, Shadow Paladin, check the link in the description. Each one of our specific videos on how each one of those specific characters plays will be linked down there.
Are we really going to do all of them?
We're going to do most of them.
Oh my god. You guys are lucky. So in Vast and Mysterious Manor, every role has a very specific objective. The Paladin wants to hunt the Spider.
But the Skeletons are trying to hunt the Paladin, and the Spider's trying to escape the Manor.
Yeah, but the Manor's trying to seal everybody inside.
But the Warlock wants to dominate the figures on the board and keep them there forever.
It's a few things.
There's a few things going on. Whatever the case, Jan, what is Vast, the Mysterious Manor?
So, Vast and Mysterious Manor is the follow-up from Leader Games from their highly successful Vast in the Crystal Caverns. So, Vast in the Mysterious Manor, the first thing it's going to do, it's going to change the setting completely. As the name suggests, we're now in a manor, and all sorts of spooky, crawly things are moving around.
Coming out of the walls.
Yeah.
What you'd expect.
And from the floorboards. And from the ceilings and
from the
pore.
crypts and the holes and the...
Yeah, every single thing.
Yeah.
So in the game, you'll don one of, depending on what you have in the base game, you'll don one of 5 rolls, or with the expansion, one of 7 rolls.
Now,
so
for
a lot.
reference, everything spread out here on the table is the core box, and go ahead and pull that over into frame. The Haunted Hallways expansion, which brings you 2 new characters, 4 more skeletons, some nice spiderweb kind of miniatures or tile placement things. So everything you're seeing is most of the core game.
With a few sprinklings of the expansion.
Yeah, exactly. So, continue telling me about
Vast and Mysterious Manor.
Setup for this game.
So, at the beginning, you'll choose a role, and one of the most important things, and one of the things that Vast is notorious for, is that you're gonna have to read. You're gonna have to read a bit. You're gonna have to read this and this. Once you have an understanding of how each role is going to work, we can start the game.
But if they're watching this video, odds are they're the person kind of running the show. They're going to be doing the setup, which we're gonna go through, knowing the key terms, and probably have tried to read a few of these pamphlets.
Yeah, I forget there's a glossary, right?
So if you're the one watching this video, odds are you're teaching your group.
And you're awesome for doing so.
And you're also setting up the board and doing your best to understand everything that's going on. So first off, check out all of our segmented off videos so you understand the general roles, but also have your players read over these cards so that they understand, help walk them through it like any asymmetric game requires.
Oh yeah.
And have them take a look at our specific kind of character guidelines. A key thing to understand about this game is you can't and you won't understand what everyone else is doing around the table.
No.
So if you're the one trying to do so, I'm sorry. And when your friends get here to play, just teach them their specific role.
Yeah, and tell them to not get too worried about everybody else.
But you're right, there is a glossary. Let's go ahead and dive into key terms, terminology, things that people need to know, things that the DM needs to know before running this game for the first time. Then we'll hop over to basic setup. So if you want to just get to basic setup, there'll be a time code down below where you can hop directly to that. And then you and I will partition off and do each specific character.
Oh yeah.
So, basic glossary in Vast, the Mysterious Manor. So in terms of the glossary and the key terms, some things make sense, like adjacency and crypts, like these open spaces here. But let's touch on a few of the ones that we specifically have had to pay attention to.
Yeah, so actually for me, crypts wasn't as intuitive as I would have thought, right? Because there's a difference between an empty space and a crypt, right? So in this game, that would be, when it has nothing, that would be considered an empty space. However, all of these areas that do not have an actual tile on them, that's a crypt, okay?
And then the ones that are flipped are
Revealed.
dark rooms,
Yeah.
revealed or unrevealed.
So a dark room is the one with the very spooky face. And when you have it face up, that's gonna be a revealed or a lit room. Okay, and that's super important in terms of most roles.
One thing that took a little bit for me to get was the difference between adjacency and surrounding.
Yeah, so adjacency is essentially anything that's connected in the four cardinal directions. However, surrounding refers to everything around a particular point.
Including diagonals. You can't move on diagonals, but if you're looking for a surrounding term condition, that includes that entire zone.
Yes.
Another thing are these passages outside. The skeletons can move along the outer track on the board. I think they're the only ones that interact with that.
Yeah, so these are actually called the grounds. And the skeletons are the only ones that can do that. And you'll notice that they're actually much larger than the board, than the entire map itself, right? Because one of the interesting things is that the skeletons can actually move around the board much quicker in order to get into different entries.
Yeah. So those are some of the key terms that we kind of glossed over. There is a glossary at the very beginning of the book, so if you have key terms throughout the course of this, feel free to reference them. We'll be sure to go over the terminology as we're diving into specific characters.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let's go ahead and talk about setup, and then we'll talk about overall rules and overall gameplay kind of structure. So the manor is this entire board. It's composed of crypts with surrounding grounds, and then we have to place tiles to set up.
Yeah, and another very important term are armories.
Armories. They're going to be the double-sorted items.
So essentially, in Vast Mysterious Manor, and this is a little bit different to what Vast Crystal Caverns was, there's a few more starting tiles. In the original, from what I remember, you started with a single tile, and everybody kind of like stemmed from there. Here, you're gonna have a few different ones. So one of the very first is going to be the entrance tile. So the entrance tile is going to be referenced specifically for the Paladin. When you reveal it, you're going to make sure that one of the open edges, right? Remember, key term. One of the open edges is going to be touching outside of the grounds, and then the two are going to go laterally. Okay?
Yep.
So every time that there's an open edge in the game, you're always going to populate it with dark tiles at the borders.
And those will come from, when you first start, you'll have a mixed stack of dark tiles, and you'll be drawing kind of blindly populating the board. But there's a few other tiles that always exist right on setup.
Yeah.
We have our Armory Tiles,
Yep.
which are marked with large, broad swords. Those will also always exist, but they don't have any open spaces around them,
Nope.
so no dark tiles currently populated.
Because they are dark tiles.
They are dark tiles themselves, yes.
And we also have the starting pit, just like the entrance tile that's going to be marked with an S in the lower right-hand corner. And the starting pit is essentially where our dear friend, the spider, comes into play.
Now, an important side note, if you're not playing with the spider,
Which you can do.
there's a lot of different variations. The starting pit won't actually be here, it'll be another armory tile. But this, for all reference, is the center of the board and where the spider starts. We will also surround that, because there are open doorways,
Four.
with another set of unrevealed hidden tiles. The Paladin, this will be a classic two-player setup. The Paladin starts here at the entrance,
Yeah.
kind of just entering. The skeletons start around the outside.
Yeah, that's going to depend on which skeletons you have, and also on the roll of a die.
The manor already exists. It's literally the board, but
Everything.
it has a figure, it has the entity that can be summoned and create patterns on the board. Paladin's here at the door, and the warlock will be in one of these unrevealed dark spaces, and will do its best to move around the crypt spaces throughout the course of the game. And then for the expansion content, the Shadow Paladin replaces the Spider, and the Armored Knight replaces the Paladin here at the front. So their starting locations are going to be the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
So once you have this board set up, this is your standard starting queue. You'll start exploring, usually with a paladin, possibly with some of the other creatures. Talk about flipping a tile and what the standard practice is for revealing different rooms.
Yeah, so reveal is one of those key terms that you have to remember because different roles are going to interact with that particular keyword differently, right? So usually, once you reveal something, you're going to follow these steps. You're going to flip the tile face up, and you're going to make sure that an open edge on the tile is touching the open edge from where you're coming from. So once you do that, you're able to rotate the tile in any direction you like, but make sure that those are connected. Now, if there are any remaining open edges, you must populate it with another dark tile. And that's essentially like the whole sequence.
That's generally for revealing. Like you said, some creatures will exist in the crypts, some will be able to travel across unrevealed tiles, and some, like our friend the Paladin here, must reveal every time they pass into a new
dark
zone.
tile.
Exactly. Along with that, on these revealed tiles, you will have a series of different symbols. I will have B-roll right now showing what those are, but we have blood, which is a little blood droplet. That means you're placing a blood token here, and the spider interacts with that tile. We have treasure. That means you're placing a treasure on that location. Most characters interact with that tile to some degree. We have the Poltergeist, which means you will automatically summon one of these onto the board. They get in everyone's way and kind of link up with the Warlock in some interesting ways. You have a pit tile. This is where skeletons can spawn. So nothing happens when you flip it immediately, but skeletons can take advantage of those kind of like teleports. You have the Armory, which already exists here on the board, and the skeletons will be the sole entities that interact with the Armory. And lastly, you have shrines. These don't do anything when they're immediately revealed. The Paladin will interact with the shrines whenever he moves on or does a crusade action, which could be a, explore an unexplored tile action. So after we have our tiles placed and our symbols identified, the next step will be beating each other up.
Oh yeah, the funnest part.
I mean, that's the core of the game.
It's basically why I play Vast.
So how does attacking work in Vast?
Attacking in Vast is pretty straightforward. Essentially, a figure is going to move into a space. However, in order for you to move into a space, a figure must have an attack that exceeds the defense of the figure that's currently there. So, for example, if our Paladin currently has an attack value of, let's say, 2, our skeletons usually have a defense value of 1, so that means that the Paladin can go in there and wreak some holy justice. And another very important thing about this game is that generally, attacks must occur. Okay? So that usually is referenced in the rulebook as forced attack. Okay? And that's going to be referenced by different factions and different people.
If you move into a space, you have to be able to attack. You are forced to attack. If you push someone into a space, there is a forced attack there. There's manipulation across the board anytime two entities come together, unless specifically stated otherwise in the character's specific rules, an attack happens.
Yeah, and another very important thing is that just because you attack doesn't necessarily mean that a roll is going to get hit in the traditional sense. Everybody takes damage in this game uniquely. Okay,
and
so that's something you have to keep in mind.
Make sure to reference your unique damage conditions. Along with that, if you fail your attack, let's say the Paladin was forced into this space, and he does not have an attack that is higher than the skeleton's current defense, he would then have to retreat based on his retreat conditions.
Correct.
For him, it would be a, open explored tile. For someone like the Warlock, it would be into a unexplored crypt space.
Because they're skittish.
The next things we want to touch on will be some just general gameplay upkeep. We have distance. How is distance counted in this game?
So distance is always going to be counted by cardinal directions. So remember when we talked about surrounding? That does not apply in distance. So for example, this Paladin is currently 3 spaces away from the pit tile.
Along with that, in some cases, distance can be changed or manipulated based on walls. So, this is not a space where the Paladin could go through. If this was a snaking pattern, he might be 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away from a specific tile.
Yep.
That being said, the spider, in its large form, can go over a single wall. So there's a little bit of difference when it comes to movement and distances in some sense, but you always count in cardinal directions.
Yeah. So visibility in the game is going to be determined by two very important factors. Similar to distance, if there's a wall in the way, obviously, these aren't X-Men, you can't see through walls.
It's blocked.
It's
Even
blocked.
if you're able to pass through, you can't see through.
It's not visible. And this is also super important. If a tile is dark, you can see into the dark tile, but you cannot see beyond the dark tile.
Yep. And finally, when it comes to all these walls that are obstructing our view, we're able to deal with them.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of options to create those spaces.
So there are breaches and there are manor-specific force walls. So breaches are going to be tiles that go down that open up a wall space. If a tile is ever rotated, flipped, moved, maneuvered, slid, whatever condition it comes down to.
So many options.
These get removed.
Yes.
The tokens on them usually stay and are carried with them, but any of these breached walls or force walls will not stay. A force wall is a specific token summoned by the manor that creates obstacles where there wasn't some in the past. So really one of the last things to cover in a general overview and setup guide for this is going to be the order of play, which is going to be super important for this. So what order do you always continually play in?
It's always going to start with the Paladin, Skeletons, Spider, Manor, and finally the Warlock.
So whatever variations of those you have, you just kind of crunch that down or expand that out. And when you're sitting around the table, sit in that order.
It's going to help a lot.
Yeah, you want to be able to continue going clockwise around the table, but it will control like where you're sitting. Lastly, for those of you that are setting up, you won't have all of these components spread across your board. Things are pretty well color-coded, but depending on which specific character or characters you're playing with, you'll want to pull out the specific components, the specific cubes, the dial trackers for that one character.
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing to note, just gonna re-go over it.
Because it's important again.
We are going to be producing a separate short video on each one of these characters, teaching you how to play them specifically and going in as deeply as we can with full kind of examples and demonstrations of what each one of their actions can do. If a player's card contradicts with a player's board, or the player's board contradicts with the rulebook itself, the general rules that we've just gone over, because a lot of them do to some degree because they're asymmetric.
Yeah.
Players' cards and powers always superimpose player boards. Player boards always superimpose the general rules and the rulebook. And when possible, if it's possible to both follow the card, the board, and or the rulebook at the same time, you always, without exception, follow as many of those rules as you can.
It sounds like a lot. It kind of is, but at the same time, it's not. We're going to help you through it.
Again, you need to know one character at a time when you're playing, and at the end of the day, just don't read anything into the text. If it doesn't state it, it's not how it's played.
So we're going to put a huge disclaimer here, right? Saying in big bold letters, don't intuit anything, don't guess, right? That's part of the video.
I think that's fair.
Okay, good.
Whatever the case, guys, if you've made it to this point, thanks for sticking through this. This is one of the first how to plays we've really dove into, especially together as a team. So leave some comments down below about what you'd like to see for future how to plays, what might be more helpful going down the road, and make sure you swing by and stop over to some of our character-specific how to plays. This is a big game. There is a lot going on, and so a general overview or a general setup and how to play is honestly a little bit more to balance than the character-specific ones, just because you want to dive into each role to some degree. Whatever you do, though, remember to do the important thing. Get out and play some games. We'll see you next time. Thank you.